It's become clear that Huohuo doesn't pick novaflares based on who needs them, and this causes some confusion on why they actually do choose characters. And before getting into the characters individually, it's probably best to cover one of the big reasons. They're basically 4 stars now. With a novaflare, they can get all the benefits that a 4-star brings them, of making the game more accessible to new players, returning players, and people wanting to get into new archetypes, without having to waste time modelling and animating a new character who still won't directly make them any money. This is probably part of why they don't touch their light cones either, because it's not just an altruistic move to make sure we still have what we paid for and are happy with the game, they're just a tool to get us to spend money elsewhere. The characters themselves are no longer the product they're trying to sell and make money from directly, they're just turning them into the 4-stars who can help sell some other character. So they don't bother buffing their light cones, since they don't really care anymore, since it's not what they will make money from. So instead of spending dev resources on making a new 4-star to sell the new Shield Limited characters, they can make a character everyone already likes better, and get good PR for buffing characters to try and bring back players who quit because of power creep. Take Welt, for example. People say he was novaflared because he's one of their favourites, which sure might contribute. It's impossible to actually tell whether it does, but there are a lot of good reasons to buff him that can help with Huohuo's bottom line, despite him being standard. A DHIL in the standard banner helps with the psychology of gacha, makes people feel better about rolling in general, and even want to play the game for standard banner tickets. They're making every endgame require 3 teams, increasing the amount of supports we need, so buffing Welt can help reduce the amount of backlash they can get for doing that by giving everyone another support, as well as helping give everyone a foot in the door of the new endgame, in order to help avoid people just completely ignoring it entirely and realising it's not worth the jade investment just to get another 100 stellar jades. If they make it so as many people as possible are already close to being able to do the new mode, then they're more likely to change their pooling plans a little to be able to properly take part. Where he's most impactful though is for new and especially returning players. And I think returning players have especially been a priority, as we'll talk about later. He makes things more accessible for established players too, just like a 4-star. Despite its mechanics, he is universal enough to work in Elation, for example. Sure, they don't get his damage bonus, but he's still good, especially since he can replace Huohuo with his pseudo-sustain utility. The biggest thing, though, is his E4. After all, isn't it strange they made it his E4? His biggest power spike being on E4 makes it just out of reach. It's far enough that most people, even those that have been playing and spending a little from day one, probably don't have it, especially because we could remove him from 50-50 loss for a while. But unlike E6, it's close enough to be enticing, to make you feel like even if you lose, you might still win, which can have a massive impact on the predatory psychology of gacha and increase impulse spending. It's a character you already have and like. Just a little bit more and you'll be able to use him everywhere. However, it being an E4 also makes his strength kind of fake. The fact it makes him so strong in just about every team doesn't end up reducing spending on other characters and the best in slot teammates that he can fill in for or replace, because If you have E4, your account is probably already developed enough that he's not as impactful. You probably already have best teammates like Cyrene that kind of locks him out of her teams, or the Elation characters that all really just want more Elation teammates regardless of their kits, or invested universal supports like E1 Tribby, or depending on your amount of companion spirits, E1 or maybe even E2 Robin. Of course, we now know the biggest reason he was buffed, so that he can really serve this 4-star role in future teams. We have limited sus leaks that Himeko wants Express members on her team, but we know for sure at this point that he's also made for Blade. He needs a second Nihility to turn on his ult damage buff, and Nihility supports have all been unpopular in the past, so it's not a condition that people can necessarily easily fulfill without Novaflared Welt. Blade is clearly made to support the new male follow-up adjacent team that is forming, and Welt has clearly also been made with that in mind, with his damage buff requiring high attack frequency to stack. And then there's also Acheron. Blade is shaping up to be the Dahlia for Acheron, and with the Novaflare, Welt can be her Ran Mei, the free support that lowers the barrier to entry and, perhaps more importantly, tempts old players into coming back to the game for the free upgrade to their favourite character. You can come back to the game to play your newly reinvigorated Acheron, and then learn about Blade and how huge he is for her, and roll and perhaps spend on the new character. Even if your Acheron is E2, he's still useful as well, because, like Ranmei, he also has the delay that helps enable sustainless. So, personally, I think it's pretty clear that it wasn't just favouritism. Despite being standard, he has a lot of ways to make them more money. Original Blade and Jingliu were characters who played around HP in some way that could be changed to work with and shill the HP meta with Hyacinth, Tribby and Castoris. They not only encouraged people to roll the new meta characters, which might have also then gotten them to go all in on the battleship as it released out of sunk cost, they could also try to bring back old players since they were popular characters in their time as well. Silverwolf, I think, is a major exception. She did still have specific synergies, but nothing strong or restrictive enough to be clearly trying to get people to roll another character for her. Instead, it seems like she was changed in hopes of actually improving her sales. I was tempted to roll her for Archer, for example. New players would want her since she could be used everywhere and reduce the feeling that they would have to get DPS of every element since she can implant weaknesses. I say that's the case especially for new players because once you've been playing for a bit you realise that, yeah, that's not really a necessity at all. As long as you have a few different elements covered, you're fine. You don't need all of them or anything. Especially now as Respen is becoming more common. And old players could be encouraged to roll her and her E2 for Acheron to try and keep her going. Silverwolf makes some sense to try and increase the sales of as a character too. They clearly feel she's popular enough, considering they've made her new version the main push this anniversary, and strong supports perform much better than DPS on reruns, so people might not have been as cautious about rolling an old unit, even with a Novaflare, if they're a support. The fact it didn't really seem to help and get many people rolling for her might be why we haven't really gotten a Novaflare that's just trying to sell the buffed characters since. The one exception would be Black Swan, who I feel like is also an exception on top of that, thanks to being Dot and thanks to Kafka's buff. Even if Black Swan herself didn't sell well at all after her Novaflare, it wouldn't really matter because it's still necessary to make people trust that Huohuo will support an archetype so that people will roll in future. They had absolutely dumpstered these historically popular characters like Kafka, Firefly, and Acheron, and were bleeding players because of that power creep. When Kafka got buffed and Hycellen's released, the number one concern people had with rolling for them was whether Huohuo would take years to do anything else for them like they had done since 2.0. So, even though it doesn't seem like Hycellen's did sell well, it's still worth it to buff Black Swan, because they need to show that they will continue to support these archetypes after they receive new support, so that people will roll for future new supports. And they need to release those new supports for old characters, even if they're not the most lucrative by themselves, so that they can improve their reputation and bring back old players, and stop even more from quitting thanks to the power creep. I think that also all explains Kafka's buff. She's an old popular character that can bring people back to the game, and not supporting her is kind of just leaving money on the table from all the work you already did making people like her. As a Stellaron hunter that's going to be featured in the game until end of service most likely, she's also just important enough to be worth trying to keep in constant meta viability and sales rotation, and as a result of that, she's more important than Black Swan, so with the Novaflare, they also made sure to make her more important in gameplay. She's the crucial enabler that should pretty much always be in demand as long as there are other .dps. Sparkle was chosen to be buffed, I think entirely because they were going to be releasing two Elation units completely dependent on each other back to back. They absolutely needed someone to fill that 4-star role of making the team cheaper to get into, because it's a very hard, very expensive sell otherwise. So they buff her and make her free in that patch, and they choose Sparkle for the job because she just makes sense. She's always been Elation in personality, and she's getting an SP as a result, so it makes sense to make her work with herself in order to appeal to her fans. Also, because without a good character to fill in for the better one until they release or until you get them, even if you do front up the cost for the new characters and they are strong, if they feel completely crap to play, it runs the risk of putting you off before the next support can even release. That happened to me with Nefer in Genshin, for example. I rolled Nefer in Lauma, but the team with Aino, and without Lauma C1 making sustain a pain in the arse, was just so annoying that I dislike the team and don't want to roll for the fixes to those problems now that I can. With Sparkle, they also took the opportunity though to get more out of her than just selling Elation. Since she needs to be given free, her Eidolons are suddenly in consideration for a lot more people. So they also took the opportunity to buff her E2 to tempt the people that already had her, and now have the opportunity to get it for only one more cost. And it worked on me at least. Huohuo is also for the exact same purpose of selling Elation, except because she's more generally good for them, instead of only really having synergy with Sparksy. They felt the need to keep her pretty weak so that they can replace her in future. And also because even outside of Elation, she could just be generally extremely universal and good, and they were giving her away for free, and they have a hard enough time selling sustains as it is without giving away ones that are completely universal and busted. That doesn't mean the Novaflare wasn't still bullshit, but hey, that's their reason. Firefly is the other one that seems like just pure favoritism, because she was already good. And yeah, it pretty much is. Just not because the devs like her, but because she sold well. I think she was specifically buffed now to desperately try and bring back people who quit. Because it's anniversary. It's the time of year when they're already doing everything to try and get eyes on the game so they can tempt new and old players alike with all the free stuff they're giving away. As part of that, they buff Firefly even though she already got Dahlia, because directly buffing an old character is easily understood even by anyone not actively playing. A new support like Dahlia doesn't cut through in the same way. It's not as clear in something like a headline, for example, that she is for Firefly. And even after you figure that out, you might be skeptical she does enough to save her and be worth not just reinstalling the game, but also actually rolling for, since it means having to spend or do a lot of farming to try and get her within a limited time period that you might have already missed by the time you hear about it. Compare that to just Firefly is getting buffed. It's easy to understand, and if it's a character you already had and liked, then why not just jump in and mess around with her a little and see what's been going on in the game. Then, once they've got you back in the game, you'll learn about and be tempted by the Dahlia, who I'm sure is rerunning fairly soon. Seele serves the same purpose, but is more complicated. She's the very first limited character and widely known, even by people not playing, to be the weakest. Buffing her is the best way to send the message that we've changed to everyone and not just Firefly fans. But because she doesn't really have a load of dormant fans to appeal to in the same way, it's still less effective. The reality is more that she was probably buffed because of the high cost of not buffing her at this point. Because while this was only the second real full set of buffs, people have still been joking and talking for a while now about how they haven't buffed her or anyone else that actually needs it. They really had to buff her. If they waited much longer, it would have really blown up in their faces and undone all the PR benefits of buffing characters in the first place. It wouldn't have been long before the talk turned into outrage and penetrated out into the wider gaming landscape, just like Star Rail's power creep problem did. And I think addressing that was the whole point of Novaflares as a system in the first place. So, in a way, I think she did end up being one of the only characters actually chosen based on need. Even then, though, they still took the opportunity to make her E6 synergize with Ashvale and the high attack frequency team that we're getting to maybe help sell them to her fans. Now, for future Novaflares, it's hard to guess without Himiko's kit, but I think some of the erudition characters might have a chance, since all the existing ones are cooked. One of them could maybe be buffed and given away for free to be a budget option, since it could also let them double dip into Big Hat Herta support. I would have guessed at Aventurine, since he's getting a new version. They could have made them work together like they did with Sparkle, since they don't really like releasing new sustains unless they build the whole meta around them. But then they changed Blade to not work with shielders, so maybe not. Unless the Novaflare also gives him healing for some reason. Otherwise, like I said, Acheron is probably a safe bet to get one at some point, just based on popularity. Although maybe the news getting around that Acheron is getting buffed would hurt the game, since people who quit in version 2 might see it as proof that the game and its power creep is unsalvageable, even if it's stabilised by that point. And of course, as everyone's been talking about lately, there's also the possibility of Sunday getting buffed, since if Himiko wants Express members, well, he does officially seem to be one now. The only thing is that the artifact set, that is the only real hint we have to Himiko's kit, seems to disincentivise her taking a load of turns like Sunday would encourage, so I don't know, we'll see. Regardless, thanks for watching. The new Fate collab has been announced, so go and watch my video discussing the difficulties of actually choosing the collab characters, since it underperformed, because I only finished it right as it leaked and became clear that we were not getting them in 4.3. Until hopefully next time, bye.